Hello, welcome to this Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. In this video, we're going to be reviewing the manifestations that you can bring in Age of Sigmar 4. Now, you may already be aware of what manifestations are, but you may also not be aware, and you may not, if you've not watched any of my reviews, understand just how impactful, but also how mandatory they are in Age of Sigmar 4. I know that seems really odd, so I'm going to dive straight in and start explaining everything. This is going to be one of a couple of videos I'm going to make about manifestations. This is kind of the groundwork one. We're just going to be going through the different manifestations and explaining what they do. There's going to be a more in-depth kind of review of how to utilize them, and also the do's and don'ts and what you can do with them, kind of an advanced module to steal from Games Workshop in that regard, on exactly how they'll work, but that will come in later. Right now, we're just going to be going through exactly what they do and, you know, which ones are our favorites. So really simple, manifestations are a collection of models that you can get from Games Workshop, which they used to be called endless spells, and either priests or wizards are going to be able to summon them to the board. A wizard can, if they're more than power level 1, so power level 1 can put 1 on the board, and then in the next turn they can put another 1 on the board. But if they're power level 2, they could put 2 on the board, and if they're power level 3, they could put 3 on the board. Nagash, for example, if he was to take Morbid Conjuration, which has got 4 manifestations in it, could put 4 on the board themselves, which is quite interesting. These things can also be attacked and killed with multiple different ways. But once they're attacked and killed, you are going to be able to recast them and put them on the board. So you use spells or prayers to bring them from kind of reserve and summon them on the board. Then you use attacks to kill them and take them off. And there are 2 types. There are static, which are treated very much like terrain that you may play against, where you can move next to it and charge past it and stuff, but then you can attack it. And then there's mobile ones, which work pretty much like how units work, with some other stipulations, but we'll talk about those in the future. But what they are going to do, is mean that when you move units around, or even when you try to deep strike, they're going to count as enemy units for being able to zone out enemy deep strikes, or mean you're going to be able to block up board space because you can't get within 3 inches of them. All of these are really problematic, and therefore they're going to cause some real confusion. Easily the most asked question at the events that I've run already are about manifestations, and this is one of my most requested videos. So we're going to do a much more serious and in-depth review of those, or the mechanics of it in the future, but I don't want to bog this down. I just want to talk about the cool things that you can do with manifestations, and that's what we're going to do starting now. So before we go any further, I'm just going to show you how the manifestations are grouped and what the manifestation laws are. When you write your Age of Sigmar 4 army list, you'll write down or note down which manifestation law you've chosen. This is in conjunction to, or in addition to, choosing your spell law or also a prayer law. So you can easily have on an army list the spell law of your choice, the prayer law of your choice, and the manifestation law of your choice. There are these ones to choose from, and in addition, there are also ones for your faction if they're available. So, for example, Seraphon don't have access to a unique manifestation law, whereas Slaanesh does. We're not going to be covering those today, and I've been putting those inside the reviews of the different armies. But some of them are quite good, and some of them are not very good. And that's also true for these, insert generic manifestations. So Forbidden Power consists of the Shards of Alagar, Laquan the Soulseeker, Horrorghast, and Soulscream Bridge. Soulscream Bridge and Shards of Alagar both are quite large bases and come in 2 different parts. So Shards of Alagar is a 2-part spell, or manifestation, and Soulscream Bridge is a 2-part manifestation. So they're big. They're absolutely massive. Next one, and the most famous one already, because it is absolutely bonkers, is the Morbid Conjuration, Purple Sun, Suffocating Gravetide, which is just a huge, I think it's 7.5 inch kind of wide, Malevolent Maelstrom, and the Soul Snare Shackles. The next one is the Aetherwrought Machineries, Chronomantic Cogs, Quicksilver Swords, and the Aether Void Pendulum. Next one is Primal Energy, which is Burning Head, Emerald Life Swarm, and Ravanax Gnashing Jaws. Next one is Twilight Sorceries with the Umbral Spellport, which is a 2-part spell, Geminids of Ulgish, which is a 2-part spell, and the Prismatic Palisade. And lastly is a single manifestation in the Kronspine Incarnate of Gur. Now, it's important to note that already it feels like that there's some strengths and weaknesses to some of these. Kronspine Incarnate, as an example, is a singular piece, but is really strong because it's a singular piece, whereas Forbidden Power has got a lot of board control because it's just huge pieces, huge bases that you can put on the board, and then is also a 4 I don't know, unit, 4 model unit. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And then Morbid Conjuration is also 4 models, whereas Aether Rorts, Primal Energy, Twilight Sorceries are all 3 models. So if you are working towards being a cast, like wanting to put manifestations on the board, then if you have a lot of casts, and I do have a guide or like a rule of thumb here, if you're less than 3 casts and you can get any bonuses to cast, you probably want to go for the Kronspine Incarnate of Gur, because that single cast is going to net you a very big, punchy manifestation. Whereas if you've got multiple casts, like Nagash, then you're going to take Morbid Conjuration, because, like, so, 3 casts or more to be able to put those on the board. So that's simple. That's simply the groups, and now we're going to look at like what they do, what it costs to cast them. But rule of thumb: less than 3 casts, Incarnate; more than 3 casts, or 3 casts plus, Morbid Conjuration. Annoyingly, the PDFs that Games Workshop have produced have got 2 different locations for the units that you are wanting to use in a manifestation lore. What you have is a page which denotes the spell that you'll cast in order to be able to generate the manifestation on the board, and then you have a war scroll for that unit, which is super annoying because you have to keep jumping in between, because some of the things are different, like where you set it up, if you have to do it outside of enemy units, its casting value, etc. But in order to put a manifestation on the board, like I said, you normally have to cast a spell, and in some cases, you need to do a prayer. So in order to get the Kronspine Incarnate on the board, you need to cast a spell in your hero phase, or you are going to be able to cast it in your opponent's turn. This is super strong. So you're probably just going to want to make a note of the stipulations around summoning your manifestations. So like I said, you cast this in your turn, or you cast this in your opponent's turn, but you banish, so the banishment value that is located on one of these units. We'll go and look at the Incarnate now so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you look at the Incarnate, it's got a banishment value of 8. You banish them only in your hero phase. The banishment ability is only done in your hero phase, which means the way it works is I do everything in my hero phase, and then my opponent can spend a command point in my hero phase to cast a spell, meaning that they could summon a manifestation after the allotted time for when I can do banishments. And I can't do banishments in my opponent's turn. So there's actually a very limited window of when you're going to be able to use the ability to get rid of these things, and it's only in your turn, which is genuinely a big deal. So I just thought I should bring that up as well. Okay, let's go and look at what we need to get an Incarnate on the board. We need to cast a spell. It needs to be done from a wizard, and we need to cast this on an 8. If there's not one on the board, you can only put one on the board, or one friendly one on the board. Then you make a casting roll, and you need to get an 8. 8 is hard. 7 is the average. Pluses to cast are going to make this more likely. And then you set up a Kronspine Incarnate of Gur, wholly within 12 inches of the caster, visible to them, and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. This is also going to include other manifestations which are mobile. And again, we're going to go look at the Kronspine Incarnate of Gur. So here you can see it's got a move value of 10. A mobile manifestation means that if you're going to set up something outside of 9 inches of enemy units, then the Incarnate is going to count for that. This means you could use these to like zone out deep strikes, a bunch of other really clever stuff, which I'll cover in the future. Okay, so what does the Kronspine Incarnate of Gur do? Okay, well, it's good. It's very good. It's got 12 health and a 4-up save. And like I said, it's something you're going to be able to kill and attack in combat. It moves 10 inches, which is very fast. And it's got the ability to charge even faster, thanks to the passive Arcane Predator. You can add 1 to the number of dice roll when making a charge rolls for this manifestation to maximum 3, while it's within 18 inches of any enemy manifestations. But if you do so, it must end that charge move within half an inch of an enemy manifestation. Now, you might see this as a negative, because you might be like, I don't want to charge the manifestations. Those manifestations could easily be near your opponent's units. Therefore, you charge the manifestation and have a more successful charge because you're rolling 3d6, but you move them right next to the manifestation, but still you have 3 inches of combat range from your from the Kronspine in order to fight other units. Just because you've charged the other manifestation does not mean that you have to attack that manifestation. As long as there's another unit within 3 inches, all of your attacks can go into that. Its attacks are pretty good. Amber Bone, Claws and Fangs. They've got 6 attacks, hitting on 4s, wound on 2s, Rend 2, unless you're fighting a manifestation, in which case it's Rend 3, and it's damage 3. This is a pretty good attack profile. So other comparisons probably are a Free Guild Marshal on Griffin, which has got 6 attacks with a very similar profile. And then also a More Grunter Gouger, which has got a similar profile if you build up its momentum points. Both of these models cost somewhere between 200 to 300 points. So I think it's fair to say that it feels like the Krunspine Incarnate is about a 200 to 300 point monster if you can summon it into your army. It's got a good attack profile. At the end of any turn, it's also got the ability Devourer of Magics, where if this manifestation destroyed an enemy manifestation this turn, you can heal 6 to this manifestation. That's pretty good. You aren't going to be able to heal it in other ways, so that's a way to bring it back to life. If it is destroyed, though, like all manifestations, you can simply recast it. And if anything, this makes manifestations incredibly strong, because some armies don't have the ability to return models from the dead. And even the armies that can return units from the dead normally can only return them at half strength. You can summon an Incarnate, have it killed, and then resummon a 200 to 300 point monster again and again. You can summon it in your opponent's turn. You can summon it in your turn. Realistically, you can put 10 Incarnates down on the board, although not obviously at the same time, but turn 1 gets killed. Resummon it in the next turn, and again, and again. And that is a lot of points over the course of a game. It's also got a passive called Wild Form, where each time this manifestation is targeted by the Banish manifestation ability, it will be banished. It's not banished. Instead, you allocate 6 damage points to it. Ward rolls can be made for those damage points. Oh, and I should mention also it's got a 6-up ward save. Now, an important note to make here is it's got the fly keyword. This is going to be really important as we go through later, because mobile manifestations, and I probably should cover this in the more in-depth review, but mobile manifestations are treated very much like units when they move around. Unit, that means as soon as it becomes a unit that you're using, it gains the fly passive. And the fly passive says that any movements that you make do not let you move within 3 inches of enemy units, which will become important when we talk about Gravetide and Purple Sun later. So Krunspine Incarnate Gur is very strong, and it's probably the thing you're going to take if you have a very low number of casts. If you've got pluses to cast, it's even better, and it's a good free 200 to 300 points addition to your army. I would encourage you, though, modelers out there, because this model I don't think looks great. Find out the base size of the Krunspine and just do something thematic with your army. You know, if you're running Cities of Sigmar, making a giant like a trebuchet, or like a, you know, one of those walking towers that they would use to assault castles. If you were running Luminath Realm Lords, make it like an elven debauched house. I don't know, whatever you want, something wild and fun, you know, that is really engaging. If you know, whatever, but it's giving you an opportunity to build some really cool minis, and I love that. The next manifestation law we're going to look at is Morbid Conjuration, and this is an incredibly strong spell. In fact, it's leagues above the others. It's massively good, way better than the others, and is just, you know, very likely to get a massive Banhammer nerf hammer very, very soon. So Morbid Conjuration is what we're going to look at. And if we look at the casting values to summon these, 3 of these manifestations / endless spells are ones that have a movement value. So Purple Sun, Suffocating Gravetide, and Malevolent... Oh, actually, Malevolent Maelstrom doesn't have a movement value. But all of those need to be set up within 12 inches of the caster and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. And Soul Snare Shackles is one that does not have a movement value, but is set up within 18 inches of the caster, or wholly within 18 inches of the caster. And then there are 3 parts to that, and then they're set up within 3 inches of each other. But that's a massive range. So all the others are set up 9 inches away from enemy units. And that's important because when you set up a model on the board, this is in the core rules, it then can't move. So I set up Purple Sun, it can't move in my turn. It can still charge, but it can't move in my turn. So that's an important thing to do, to note about these things. When you set up something, you can't then move. The Purple Sun is the most difficult to cast, then it's Gravetide, and then the other 2 are 6s. So Purple Sun is going to be a difficult one to cast. So the first that we're going to look at is one of the easiest to cast. It's Soul Snare Shackles, and it's cast on a 6. You set it up wholly within 18 inches of the caster, and this is a 3-part spell, with each one of those 3 parts needed to be within 3 inches of each other, and wholly within 18 inches of the caster. Let me tell you, 18 inches is a really massive range in this game. It's got 6 health and a 5-up save with a 6-up ward. It's very killable, but it's static. That means you're going to be able to set it up right next to an enemy unit. You do not need to be 9 inches away. That's pretty good because of the ability that it has, Bound for the Great Oubliette, which is done in any hero phase. For each part of this manifestation, you can pick an enemy unit within 3 inches of that part to be the targets. You cannot pick the same unit to be the target of this ability more than once a turn. You roll a d3, and on a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll, and then you subtract the number of inches equal to the roll from the target's move characteristic for the rest of the turn. Now, the move characteristic thing isn't a massive deal depending on exactly the units you're fighting. I fought against Stormcast Eternals the other day. Some Annihilators dropped down. They dropped 9 inches away. They failed their charge. Then in my turn, I just dropped this right next to them, turning them from, because I rolled a couple of 3s, turning them from movement 4 to movement 1 inch, which is pretty funny. In addition, I did 3 mortal wounds, which killed an Annihilator immediately. This is especially good for other armies that do mortal damage at range, like Croak, as an example, for Seraphon, or Tzeentch with their spellcasting, or a bunch of other stuff. It's actually good for literally everything in the game. And it's 18-inch range. And again, I can't express this enough. It's free. 0 points to cast this. It's just going to cost you 1. Sure, your opponent can kill it. But if they kill it, then you're going to be able to resummon it. In addition, it's got 3 parts, so you can really block up the board. You can move over manifestations, but with terrain that you can't move across and your opponent's range for not being able to move within, you can genuinely create a zone where your opponent may not be able to charge you or may not be able to move, which is because it's quite a lot of, you could create a lot of space with it. This is going to become even worse when we talk about some of the larger manifestations. But Soul Snare Shackles is just 11 out of 10. I would probably rate this if it was just a unit that you could do something with. This is 50 to 150 points of value as a singular spell. The next spell, or the next manifestation in this manifestation lore, is the Malevolent Maelstrom. And it does just an amazing amount of mortal damage. It's incredible. So you set this up wholly within 12 inches of the caster, 9 inches from enemy units. And when you do set it up, you set up a manifestation point, or Maelstrom point, right next to it. And this uses the passive Necrotic Vortex. So I cast it, I set it up, and I'm 9 inches away from my enemy. Perfect. Okay? And then you have a 1 on its little token. Each time a unit is successfully cast a spell, while it's within 12 inches of this manifestation, you'll add an additional Maelstrom point. And then each time a model is slain within 12 inches of this manifestation, you'll add another point. This manifestation can have a maximum of 6 Maelstrom points. Okay, we'll just stop there for a moment. It moves 8 inches. It's got 6 health, 6-up save, and is a banishment value of 7. It's got a 6-up ward save, and it's also got fly. It is fairly fragile and can get killed pretty easy. That's important for what we're about to talk about next, because the Malevolent Maelstrom, as well as having, for some reason, 2d6 attacks, 2s and 3s, no ran, damage 1, and then crit 2 hits, which is an okay attack profile for something that's free, has the ability Morbid Detonation, which is done at the end of any turn. It has a stipulation, which is if this manifestation has 6 Maelstrom points, pick each unit, friendly and enemy, within 9 inches of it to be the targets. So this is a bit of a difficult manifestation to use, because I've set it up wholly within 12 inches of myself, but 9 inches away from enemy units. That means that the Morbid Detonation isn't going to work on the turn in which it's set up, because it will never be close enough to enemy units unless they've done a counter charge, as an example, or if they've charged into me because I've used the ability counterspell to cast this spell in their turn, which is very possible. But either way, on that first kind of turn, unless people are moving near it, which is a mistake, it's not going to be able to detonate the things maybe that you want. So maybe you could use it to guard dog an objective. And then you're going to really struggle to guarantee the the Maelstrom points are going to tick up the way that you want. But again, it's all about the hard work making this pay off. If you do make it pay off, you roll a dice for each target that's friend or enemy within 9 inches. On a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So that would be, on a 2+, 6 mortal damage on everything within 9 inches. That's wild. Absolutely wild. That's a ton of mortal damage. harder to use, a high skill expression manifestation to do, but this is probably one of the most mortal damaging spells in the entire game, and therefore would be, 100-ish points upwards easily as a manifestation. The next manifestation is the Suffocating Gravetide, which is a 7 to cast and set up. You set it up wholly within 12 inches of the caster, and you set it up 9 inches away from enemy units. It's got 8 health with a 6-up save and a 6-up ward save, so it's fairly easy to kill. But, you kill it, that means you're not maybe doing damage to other units on the board, which is a real problem. Either way, and don't forget when you set it up outside of 9 inches, you could potentially still charge it in, which is great because you do want to charge it in because he gets +1 damage on the charge. Its melee attack profile is legit with 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, and then damage 2 on the charge for a potential 16 damage, which is pretty nutty in my opinion. It's also got the fly keyword, so that means it's not going to be able to move into combat, and therefore it's going to need to charge into combat, which many people are missing because there is an ability called Pulled to the Grave, which in your movement phase, this manifestation can move a distance up to its move characteristic. It can pass through models during that move. Then you can pick an enemy unit that this manifestation passed across during that move to be the target. You roll a dice, and for each model in the target unit, for each 5+, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the target unit. So this is what we would call a horde clearing spell. And in some cases, it's just a unique spell that are on people's spell laws or are even on war scrolls for certain units, which is crazy because if you're fighting against 20 dudes, then just by the sheer ability to move across a unit, this unit is going to be able to do 4 or 5 mortal damage and then charge and do a bunch more damage as well, which is genuinely very impressive. Now, don't forget, of course, you can't move into combat because of the fly keyword. Please go look up what the fly keyword does there. But it's got the ability to do mortal damage against large bricks of units. It's got 8 attacks damage due on the charge, and it's free. So I got to feel this costs like 150 points? 100? Let me know what you think. In fact, actually, at home, when you're watching this video, let me know what you think this costs. But it's very good. To wrap up this manifestation lore, it's the most difficult to cast on an 8, and again, wholly within 12 inches of the caster and 9 inches away from enemy units. Therefore, it's not going to be able to do anything to its opponent in the turn unless it charges. It's got 10 health with a 5-up save and a 6-up ward save, which is pretty similar to an Incarnate, really, and has got the same ability an Incarnate has, Wild Form, which is a passive. Each time this manifestation is targeted by the banished manifestation ability, it would be banished. It is not banished, instead allocate 6 damage points to it. Ward rolls can be made for those damage points. Therefore, it's, basically a kind of like semi-incarnate, but is buried in a lore with 3 other manifestations, which is pretty good. It's got a pretty good combat attack, 2d6 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1, and any 6s to hit are going to have critical mortals. It moves 8 inches on a turn in which it can move, and in your movement phase, it can use the ability End Given Form, where this manifestation can move a distance up to its move characteristic. It can pass through models during that move, but cannot end in combat thanks to the fly passive you can see at the bottom there, next to where it says ward. Then pick up to 3 enemy units that this manifestation passed across during that move to be the targets. Roll a d3 for each target. On a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage. So you could do some mortal damage to some units, which is pretty nice. But probably the main reason that you're going to take it is thanks to the passive, the Pull of Nadir, where you subtract 1 from the save rolls for enemy units while they're within 3 inches of this manifestation. Now, it does have the red box, as you can see there, but as I understand it, that passive is going to apply in any phase, therefore also in shooting, if it survives. With 10 health and a 5-up save, it probably isn't going to survive loads, but -1 to save rolls is really nice if you're using it to charge in with other units. If you charged in a Purple Sun and also a Gravetide at the same time, then that unit that you're fighting would be rend 1 because of Gravetide and also -1 save because of the Pull of Nadir, meaning that Gravetide is effectively rend 2, which is pretty nuts. But it does mean that you can use this to really increase the output of your units on a turn in which they charge when you charge them in together. The big downside is that it's really difficult to cast. This is very comfortably the best of the manifestation laws. It's got the ability to do loads of charge damage. Also, each one of the 3 mobile manifestations are going to create what we call a zone. So 9 inches away from them in order to deep strike or be able to do things like teleports. Therefore, you can create a lot of zonal control, blocking out objectives or even whole portions of the board, and really neutering a lot of other abilities that your opponent is going to try to use. Good combat, the ability to debuff stuff, the ability to do loads of mortal damage, and all of this for the cost of 0. Therefore, it's pretty good. I'd put the Purple Sun at around 100 points as well, which, if you've been doing some dirty maths alongside me, that means that this spell lore is somewhere between 400 to 500 points worth of value in addition to what your army is like. Therefore, significantly more impactful than, obviously, the Incarnate, and you can keep summoning them when they've been killed. So the next lore that we're going to look at is the Morbid Conjuration lore. Sorry, not Morbid Conjuration. We could do Forbidden Power. Don't know what I was talking about there. We're doing Forbidden Power, which contains Shards of Alagar, Soul Screen Bridge, Laquan the Soul Seeker, and the Horrorghast. So Shards of Alagar and the Soul Screen Bridge are both 2-part manifestations. So that's something to watch out for there. And then when we start looking at the casting values, we can see that Shards of Alagar and the Soul Screen Bridge are cast on a 6. They're set up wholly within 18 inches of the caster and 9 inches away from each other. Sorry, within 9 inches of each other, because they're 2 parts. The other two, Laquan is cast on a 7, and it's set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster, 9 inches away. And Horrorghast is wholly within 12 inches of the caster, 9 inches away. The first one we're going to look at is the Shards of Valagar. So the first manifestation we'll look at is Shards of Valagar. Shards of Valagar is a 2-part manifestation / endless spell, and they've got a shared wounds pool of 8 health with a 4-up save and a 6-up ward save. So they're fairly survivable. You've got to put some actual effort in to kill them. They have an ability called Phantasmal Translocation, which you do in your movement phase. Don't forget you set them up within 18 inches of the caster, and they're massive. They're absolutely huge bases. They're the same base as a Tree Lord, and you've got 2 of them. And you can set them up within 9 inches of each other, so you can do some real difficult stuff with them. So what you can do in your movement phase is pick a part of this manifestation, remove it from the battlefield, and set it up again on the battlefield wholly within 9 inches of the other part. This is pretty good because this means you're going to be able to block a piece of board, screen out one of your units, a bunch of different stuff. If your opponent was tempted to countercharge into them, because they can be charged into, you can move it so that's not possible anymore. A bunch of interesting stuff. And then the passive Ensnaring Soul Drain. Each time an enemy unit uses a move ability, while it's within 6 inches of any friendly parts, any parts of this manifestation, the effects of the fly ability do not apply to that unit, and enemy units cannot be set up within 6 inches of either part of this manifestation. So that means that if you're trying to fly over this large model, that means if you're trying to move over this model, it's going to turn off that fly keyword, so it's going to be more of a challenge to move over. You can move over them, but you cannot land on them. That's how manifestations work. And while these are static manifestations and they do not normally stop setting up deep strikes or being able to teleport near them, they do because of their ability to not let units set within 6 inches of them. So they create another little bit of a screen. You could always summon these behind your single objective at the back of the board and make it so your opponent's going to really struggle. Although 6 inches, they're probably going to get the charge off. But 18-inch range, that's massive. You can block up loads of pieces of board. I think it's really effective. So yeah, Shards of Alagar, huge bases and free, therefore great. The next manifestation we're going to talk about is another 2-part manifestation on an even larger base than the Shards of Alagar, and it's the Soul Screen Bridge. It's very survivable with a shared health pool of 12 health with a 4-up save. Now that is a legit, and a 6-up ward save. That is a legit health pool that you're going to have to dedicate some actual combat or shooting prowess to get rid of. It's a problem unit, is what I'm going to say. Anyway, it's got this ability called Deathly Passage, which you do in your movement phase. Pick a friendly unit wholly within 6 inches of one part of this manifestation to be the target, remove the target from the battlefield, and set it up again on the battlefield wholly within 6 inches of the other part of this manifestation, more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Now, obviously, this means you're still going to have to roll a 9 to do a charge. So pluses to charge, like 3d6 charging units are going to be very effective with this because you're not going to be able to move after you've done the setup, but then you could be somewhere else. Wholly within 18 inches of the caster, but 9 inches of each other means that's quite a lot of board space that these could take up, block objectives, control the board, and your opponent's going to have to legit put some combat output in to get rid of them. So they're kind of good because they're just a waste of resources for your opponent. a teleport might be quite spicy. Teleport a shooting unit over, do some blamming. That could be pretty fun. That's quite an interesting little take, in my opinion. But yeah, very interesting. You know, then do a redeploy in their turn and hide behind the manifestation. I don't know. There's some interesting play there. I think you'll be really clever with this. The next manifestation is Lakwon the Soul Seeker, also affectionately known as the Bringy Dingy, and holds the title of maybe the ugliest manifestation available for you to purchase. It's got 10 health and a 4-up save, and it has to be cast within 12 inches of the caster and 9 inches away from enemy units. It moves 12 inches, which is pretty important for the ability we're about to talk about, and it's got an okay combat profile with 3 attacks, 4s and 3s, rend 1, damage D3. I mean, okay for free. Pretty survivable. 10 health, 4-up save, 6-up ward save, pretty survivable. It's also got a moving manifestation, so like the others, you're going to be able to use it to screen from teleports and a bunch of other stuff, which is pretty nice. In your movement phase, you can traverse the Tides of Death and pick a friendly infantry wizard hero within 3 inches of this manifestation to be the target. This manifestation can move a distance up to its move characteristic. It can pass through models during that move, then remove the target from the battlefield and set them up on the battlefield within 3 inches of this manifestation and not in combat. Then inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. I'm sure there's going to be some pretty good infantry wizard heroes that you're going to want to get that close to your opponent, which I think is quite interesting. Then, of course, because they're so close, they're going to be able to charge. But it really depends on which infantry wizard heroes make the cut. And seeing as the other pieces also give you some movement abilities, I think you're going to be able to combine all of those as a very dynamic and mobile game state. But we'll have to see. I quite like Skaven. Skaven have got the ability to like move out of combat. They've got hero phase moves. There's a bunch of moving in Skaven, which I think could make this quite spicy. But this guy definitely could just be a very mobile piece of tech for just moving around the board and stopping your opponent being able to get onto portions of the board because it's a mobile manifestation. Horrorghast is set up within 12 inches of the caster, 9 inches away from enemy units. It's got 6 health, 6-up save, and a 6-up ward, so it's not very survivable. Only moves 8 inches. But the good news about setting it up 9 inches away from the enemy is it's going to be able to use its shooting attack on the turn in which it's set up, which has got a 10-inch range. Scream of Terror is 10-inch range with 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, damage 1. If you're shooting against infantry, it's rend 3, which is pretty good. It's only 6 attacks though, so whatever. And then it's got the Deathly Touch melee profile, which is 4 attacks, damage 1. But the reason that you probably will bring this is because of the Harbinger of Horror ability, where you pick an enemy unit that was targeted by this manifestation, shooting attacks this phase to be the target. You roll a dice. If the roll is less than the number of models in the target unit that was slain this phase, the target cannot use commands for the rest of the turn. So just a free shooting attack and the ability to do to shut down commands is kind of interesting. It is kind of interesting. Let me know how many points you think this would cost. But that is that whole spell lore, the forbidden power. You've got some very large bases you're going to be able to block the board up with, and then 2 mobile pieces you can use to like zone out deep strikes and stuff. But as you can see, it clearly doesn't have the raw output of Morbid Conjuration, which can do tons of mortal damage from Malevolent Maelstrom, additional mortal damage from Soulset Shackles, great combat profiles from both Suffocating Gravetide and Purple Sun. Suffocating Gravetide itself does more damage than the entire of the Forbidden Power manifestation lore. Therefore, it's not as good as that. And the reason to compare them is they're the same points, which is free. So take this. Next manifestation lore we're going to look at is the Primal Energy manifestation lore. That consists of the Burning Head, the Emerald Life Swarm, and Ravanax and Gnashing Jaws. Again, massive shout out to both the Life Swarm and the Burning Head, which are truly, truly terrible sculpts. Okay, so the Burning Head is cast on a 5, and you have to set up within 12 inches of the caster, and then more than 9 inches from enemy units. Life Swarm is a 6, wholly within 12 inches of the caster, and more than 9 inches from enemy units. And then Ravanax Gnashing Jaws is cast on 7, wholly within 12 inches of the caster, and more than 9 inches from enemy units. As you can see, this is already 1 less manifestation than the other manifestation laws. So it's going to really have to battle to be better than the others. So let's look at what those manifestations do. The first manifestation we're going to look at is the Burning Head. It's pretty cool because it's a shooting piece, really, although it's pretty good in combat as well. Anyway, you set it up 9 inches away from the enemy, wholly within 12 inches of the caster. It's got a 6 health, 6-up save, and a 6-up ward save, so it is not very survivable, but it has got a 10-inch shooting attack, so you can shoot as soon as you set it up. D6 shots, hits on 2s, wounds on 3s, rend 2, unless you're shooting against a war machine, in which case it's rend 3 and damage 1. But it's D6 shots, so it'll be fairly inconsistent. And then Flaming Maw has got 2d6 attacks in combat, 2s and 3s, rend 2, unless it's a war machine, in which case it's, and then damage 1, which is a pretty good profile for something that's free. Burning Up, and it's also not very survivable, so in combat it will get killed back, but then you can just resummon it, right? It's got a passive Burning Up, where each time its manifestation uses a shoot ability, the ability has been resolved. This unit will take 1 damage point to its manifestation, and ward rolls can be made for that damage point. So it's just a free unit you can summon for a spell that is going to do some shooting. Your opponent might not care to get rid of it. If you get a charge off, it's an additional 2d6 attacks, which is pretty spicy. It could be good enough to legit clear a unit of infantry off the board and then grab you an objective. Or it can't grab an objective, but obviously another unit could. So a cool little spell. Our next manifestation is Ravenak's Gnashing Jaws. Now, you got to set it up 9 inches away from the enemy units, and it's got 10 health with a 5-up save, so it's a little bit it's like one of those survivable combat ones with a 6-up ward save. It doesn't have the fly keyword. That's an important note. It moves 3d6 inches, so can be very fast on a turn in which it can move. And then when it does charge, it's got 10 attacks, hitting on 4s, wound on 2s, rend 1, damage 1 with +1 damage on the charge. In any charge phase, it can use Ravening Hunger, where if this manifestation charges turn, you can roll 10 dice. For each 5+, you can inflict 1 mortal damage on the charge. So 3 or 4 mortal damage on the charge with the potential to do 20 damage in combat. I know you're hitting on 4s, right? So that's pretty good. And then it's got the Wild Form ability, which we've seen previously, where if it would take you were trying to do Banish Manifestation on it, then it's just going to take 6 damage points instead. So this thing is good. Great combat profile, like a legit unit. You know, couple of 100 points for this bad boy if you were taking this as a unit, like 150 maybe. But it's free. Charge it in, die, summon it back, charge it in again. Have a great time. The next manifestation is the Emerald Life Swarm with 5 health, 6-up save, 6-up ward save. Again, outside of 9 inches your opponent, but that's fine because you don't really want it to be near your opponent, even though it has got 2d6 attacks again with +1 rend against infantry, but it's 4s of 4, so it's not that strong. The reason that you want this manifestation with its very low health pool is because of the bounteous healing ability that you can do in your movement phase, where you pick a friendly unit within 3 inches and you heal 3 to the target. Especially good on big models that want to do a lot of healing and can follow it around. In addition, at the end of any turn, you can heal 3 to this manifestation, which is also, in my opinion, very, very nice, because you're going to be able to make sure it keeps up that little 5 health pool all the time, so you maybe don't have to recast it. But, you know, an additional heal 3 to your target, especially good in some armies that don't have access to a lot of healing, feels really good, and I really like it. I'd say this feels like the second best lore that we've read so far, with obviously Morbid Conjuration being the best, and then Forbidden Power not being as good. But each one of these pieces does something. Burn Ahead at a shooting attack. Ravenak's Gnashing Jaws is a legit combat threat. And Life Swarm is going to add additional healing into your army, which feels very strong. The next manifestation lore that we're going to look at is Aetherwrought Machineries, containing Chronomantic Cogs, Quicksilver Swords, and the Aether Void Pendulum. If we go on to look at these, we can see that it's a 6 for Chronomantic Cogs and is set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster. It's a 6 for Quicksilver Swords, and that's wholly within 12 inches of the caster and 9 away from the enemy. And then the Aether Void Pendulum is also a 6 to make this one a very simple manifestation lore. And again, wholly within 12 inches of the caster and 9 inches away from the enemy. So let's go look at what they do. So the first manifestation we'll look at is Chronomantic Cogs, which is like a support piece. It's got 6 health and a 4-up save, and it can be set up closer to enemy units than 9 inches, and is static, therefore isn't going to create any area of effect, so your opponent isn't going to be able to, you know, deep strike within range of it, those sorts of things. It's not going to be a zoning piece. Zoning it has a range where you can't get near it. It's got an ability called Mechanisms of Time. Once per turn in your hero phase, if there are any friendly wizards within 3 inches of this manifestation, you pick one of the following effects. Till the start of your next turn, you can reroll charge rolls for friendly units while they're wholly within 12 inches of manifestation. Obviously, this is great for being able to make it so that your opponent is, like, you're going to be able to more likely do charges, which is really good. Really, really effective. And then decrease the flow of time till the start of your next turn. Subtract 1 from hit rolls that target friendly wizards or the wholly within 12 inches manifestation. This is especially nice if you can. This is especially nice if you can get additional minuses to hit in your list. Therefore, those wizards are going to be -2 to hit. So even if your opponent gets +1 to hit, you're still going to be -1, which is what it caps out at. And that can be very devastating to some armies because some armies only really hit on 4s. So a very supportive tech piece for wizard-based armies, or a great tech piece for armies looking to do big charges. Either way, love it. The next manifestation is the Aether Void Pendulum, the Doom, the Scythe. 6 health, 5-up save with a 6-up ward save. It moves 8 inches, which is very important because the passive, the Pendulum Swings, means that this manifestation cannot use charge or fight abilities. In addition, when this manifestation moves, it must move in a straight line, either in the direction in which the tip of the pendulum blade is pointing, or in the opposite direction to the direction in which the tip of the pendulum blade is pointing. Okay, and it moves 8 inches. It's got the fly keyword. You can see it right there. Fly keyword states that a unit with the fly keyword can move through enemy enemy ranges, 3-inch range, but cannot end within 3 inches. Therefore, fly keyword develops as a restriction where this unit is never going to be able to move itself into combat. But if you are able to move over a unit and move back, let's say you start within 3 inches and you can just kind of fly over then fly back outside of 3, you can use the Scything Blade ability in any movement phase. This manifestation can move a distance up to its move characteristic, pass through models during that move, then pick up to 3 enemy units that the manifestation passed across during that move to be the targets. Roll a d6 for each target, on a 2+, inflict that amount of mortal damage. So that's pretty great. And that's in any movement phase. So every movement phase is just going to be like boop, 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 which is fun. Okay, potentially a ton of mortal damage, but the enemy needs to start really close to you because you only move 8 inches. The next manifestation, a Quicksilver Swords, which is 6 health with a 5-up armor save and a 6-up ward save. Move 8 inches and you have to set it up 9 inches away from enemy units when you summon them. Quicksilver Blades has got 12 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1 in combat, and they have crit mortals, which is pretty spicy. So potentially 2 or 3 mortal wound. Oh, it should statistically be 2, but mortal damage, that's fun. And then the passive Dancing Blades means ward rolls can't be made for damage points inflicted by this manifestation's attacks, which is nice. Like, there's the opportunity to use these things as like defensive units, right? Just set up Quicksilver Swords right next to one of your units you don't want your opponent to charge. And then if they charge it, then at least the Quicksilver Sword is going to do some attack damage back into it. Or summon them aggressively to start charging onto objectives, start clearing out little infantry units, little skirmish lines, and engage early with the manifestations. So those are the 3 manifestations you get in this spell lore. You have the ability to either protect your wizards or charge faster, a very difficult to use but highly damaging Aether Void Pendulum, or Quicksilver Swords, which will do a consistent amount of damage in combat, which is pretty fun. Although I don't think any of them do quite the sheer amount of volume of work that Morbid Conjuration does, cogs could be very effective for armies that are really trying to make big long bomb charges, like armies around Kragnos that are doing 3d6 charges, prosecutors doing 3d6 charges, stuff like that, which is pretty good. The next manifestation lore is the Twilight Sorceries, which consists of the Umbral Spell Portal, which is a 2-part manifestation, the Geminids of Ulgish, which is also a 2-part manifestation, and the very long and thin prismatic Palisades. I've always been told that's bad. So the Twilight Sorceries, they're quite difficult to cast compared to some of the other spell lores where they're all cast on a 7. The Umbral Spell Portal has to be set up wholly within 18 inches of the caster and visible to them, and then the 2 parts need to be set up within 9 inches of each other, or no restriction of needing to be set up 9 inches away from the enemy. The Geminids need to be set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster and within 9 inches of each other, and again, no restriction from outside of 9 inches. And then more than 9 inches from enemy units. I apologize. You do need to be 9 inches away from enemy units. And then the Prismatic Palisade is holding 18 inches of the caster and does not need to be outside of 9 inches of enemy units. So again, Umbral Spell Portal is 18, 9 of each other. Geminids is holding 12 inches of the caster and then 9 inches from enemy units. And then Prismatic Palisade is right next to the enemy if you want it to be. The first of the manifestation we'll look at is the Geminids of Ulgish, which is a 2-part manifestation. They have a shared health pool of 8 health with a 6-up save and 6-up ward save, so they're pretty fragile, although 8 health is still fine. They have the ability multi-parts, which is a passive, where each time this manifestation moves, both its parts must end within 9 inches of each other, and each part is armed with Tendrils and Light and Shadow, which is a lot of attacks. that means that this kind of pair of balls. I've got 4 attacks each that hit on threes, wound on threes, rend 1, damage D3. So that is 8 attacks, 3s, rend 1, damage D3. That's a lot of attacks, ladies and gentlemen, and a lot of damage. So I love that. And then it's got an ability, Tendrils of Light and Shadow. And then enemy units cannot use commands while they're within 3 inches of either part of this manifestation. So that's pretty good too. Enemy units cannot use commands while they're within 3 inches of each part of this manifestation. So shutting down commands, but they do need to be in combat. And that means they're going to probably get killed. But you could just resummon them. So, you could potentially have these be a defensive piece. So if your opponent charges you, then they can't use all-out attack. Or charge them in at the same time as a unit, so you don't want your opponent to use all-out defense. That's a pretty great ability to shut down the opponent. The next manifestation is the Umbral Spell Portal, 2-part manifestation with a combined health characteristic of 8 health with a 5-up save. They have got the ability to do spells through them. That's what they do. So they're fairly survivable. In your hero phase, you could use Arcane Passage. Pick a friendly wizard within 3 inches of this manifestation to be the target. The next time the target uses a non-summon spell ability, add 1 to the casting value of that spell. And when picking targets for that spell, you can measure range and visibility from either part of this manifestation instead of from the caster. And your opponent can measure range and visibility from either part of this manifestation instead of to the caster for the purpose of the Unbind ability. Now, you might have a clutch spell that you would like to use. And there are some really, really good spells that have some limited range. Like, for instance, Strike Last on some spell laws is like got 12-inch range. So being able to add the extent of being able to set this up within 18 inches of the caster, you have to be within 3 inches of the manifestation. So it's 3 inches to the base of the manifestation, which is an additional 2, then 9 inches to the next piece of the manifestation, and then measure from the end of that. So really it's like 9 inches plus 4 inches plus 3 inches. So you're effectively adding something like 16 inches onto a spell cast, making a 12-inch spell go up to like a 28-inch range spell, which is pretty interesting. And then your opponent is going to have to try and kill it to shut it down. It's only useful in your hero phase, but it's still really fun, especially for extending very key spells. The last manifestation in this spell lore is the Prismatic Palisade. With 8 health and a 4-up save, it's got the passive Blinding Light, where this manifestation cannot be targeted by shooting attacks. In addition, a unit cannot be targeted by shooting attacks if it's impossible to draw a line of sight from a model in the attacking unit to a model in the target unit without that line of passing across this manifestation. So it basically is going to block shooting attacks, which is really nice because it's got a really big setup range. So what you can do is just cast this in your opponent's turn and set this up in front of their shooting units, looking at you, Fusiliers, as an example, and then just make it so that they're going to really struggle to shoot your units. And because you do this in your opponent's turn, the opponent is going to be past the step where they're going to be able to banish it, although they still can attempt to unbind the casting of that spell, which I think is an important thing to add. So Prismatic Palisade, pretty cool in my opinion, especially against shooting armies. And shooting armies seem really good in Age of Sigmar right now. So that is that manifestation lore. Umbral Spell Portal, Geminids, and Prismatic Palisade. Genuinely very impressed with the sheer melee output of Geminids, and its ability to turn off commands feels like a bonus in conjunction with charging. Spell Portal for a clutch spell, and Prismatic Palisade as a clutch spell that you're going to be able to do to be able to shut down shooting units feels really clever, in my opinion, and I quite like that. But going through the manifestations, I think there's a clear winner in the Morbid Conjuration, and as we've already seen, is very, very popular. I personally like Primal Energy as well. I think this brings nice utility to your list, but I would say that this is a degree lower, like significantly lower. It's not like a very close first and second. It's like Morbid is like an S, and then Primal Energy is like the B, in my opinion. So yeah, it goes down to a B. Then you've got things like Forbidden Power, I think is really low. It's like a D or something like that, with the Incarnate probably taking 3rd place. I do like the utility of Twilight Sorceries. I think Twilight Sorceries could see some genuine play in the right builds, depending on how you're going to build your army. However, the manifestations are all free, and that's something you can't ignore. They're not free to build. And I would encourage you, if you don't feel like you want to spend money on these manifestations, because I feel it is not long until they are not free points-wise, and we start to see some pretty massive either FAQ changes or some points adjustments to these units. Therefore, I would argue that if you would like to kit bash some of the favorite manifestations and bring them along, that is a really healthy thing to do this early in the game. Games Workshop is notorious for making massive FAQ changes and completely rewriting how stuff works. And I put like a 6 month to a year on how manifestations do work. So just be conscious of that before you go out spending big money and before you feel disappointed. But I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have enjoyed it, then please do like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about all the different manifestations. Let me know what you think about their impact in the game. And then I will do some more videos about manifestations in the future. But if you've got any questions, write them in the comments so that I can answer them in the future. Thanks very much for watching my video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.